Hello and welcome to Pedal of the Month. This is intended to be a companion series to Guitar of the Month. So every month there will be a guitar video comes out, then a fortnight later pedal video comes out, because if guitars are fun to talk about, imagine how fun pedals are to talk about. Guitarists are gifted because they get to shop for pedals, these mystical wee things that almost fit in your pocket, which provide one little job and make you sound amazing, or they're just a little daft thing to play around with. They're also small enough to hide from your significant other from a financial standpoint or from a size standpoint. So it's pay week, you're on the way home from work, you pass a music shop for 20 quid to 200 quid, depending on what your job is. You can dip in, find another pedal. Takes a wee while before anybody notices that they're growing and multiplying in your house. So, as I was growing up and teenager playing guitars, you slowly realised that there was these things that were making your idols sound big, etc. And they were the guitar pedals. We were listening to bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana, who had like these big, horrible sounds. Horrible in a good way. It's a very strange world. And we were surrounded by really cheap practice amps that usually had a distortion knob or a gain knob or a channel 2 on the Marshalls, that overdrive. It's called so many different things. And it's all this kind of, it's really like compressors. Nobody quite understands where overdrive ends and distortion stops and gain and all these different words. But basically, you're adding dirt to a clean signal so that it sounds better. So as I was growing up, a few things came into my hands, and they were usually cast-offs or hand-me-downs. I think I had a chorus pedal and a flanger or something like that. So I'm aiming to have something that's like sounding like Kurt Cobain, and I'm wiring a flange and a chorus in series if I can steal enough 9-volt batteries from smoke alarms. And it's just not really working for me. And then we had distortion that's coming from amps, these Marshall amps that you turn on. Our Marshall amps were either knockoffs or really cheap or not Marshalls. So they were tinny, they were small, they were horrible. And then people were adding the Orange Boss DS1 to that, so it was getting even tinnier. So we were going to gigs and you were just hearing these high frequencies. I had my ears medically tested quite recently, and I was astounded that there's not more damage up at that end of the frequency spectrum, because I spent my youth listening to bands in small pubs who were playing tinny guitars into tinny amps through tinny distortion pedals. So I actually hated the Boss DS1. I didn't really see that it added anything. And then went to university, started to study electronics, realised that I could possibly build these things myself. I didn't really know what I was going for, but I was aware that my skill base was starting to get closer to knowing what the innards of these things looked like. I didn't really want to admit it, but I didn't really like that loud distortion that was coming from the Marshall amps, that loud distortion that was coming from the DS1. We were on the cheap end of the spectrum. I now realise that if everything was a little bit more expensive, it gets higher quality. And then fast forward a few years more, and I started to build pedals. And I was getting various kits sent to me from around the world. And the first thing I built was a fuzz, which sounds lovely, but that will be another month. But my favourite thing that I built was a Big Muff clone. My turning into an album called Super Fuzz Big Muff, which for teenage schoolboys was very humorous. And we were vaguely aware that actually Big Muff was a pedal. And we were aware that it was just like these Boss DS1s I didn't like. So I never really thought about it until I had the opportunity to build one. So I went to a company called Build Your Own Clone, who had a Big Muff clone that you could build, and I'd already done a few of their kits, including a fuzz, and I can't remember what order I did everything in, but I had this clone and it was called a large beaver. Right? You get the joke. Ongoing jokes. And it let me open up this world of distortion that is not the Boss DS1 and is not the overdrive channel in a Marshall amp. So I'm dying to just show you. So I will. The best explanation is you have your guitar and you play power chords. And when you turn this thing on, you get the sound of distorted transistors on your signal, which adds this warmth and loveliness and disgustingness. So that's what I had been looking for all those years, despite the fact that I was probably more likely to listen to REM than Metallica. This was a cut above with the DS1s and the DS1 knockoffs that we're listening to. Now, I've never owned a DS1 because I didn't like them. One day I'm going to buy one day I'm going to have that spare 50 quid or whatever it is to buy a DS1 and find out that I can probably make it sound like that as well. But this was my journey, was that I discovered the Big Muff. I'm just going to do that again. So you almost get this sound of kind of dying amp. You can feel like the kind of it squares off the wave, the sound wave, and you can kind of hear everything struggling and kind of crumbling, and it just provides those moments in Smashing Pumpkins where it's quiet and then there's this like quiet before the storm, and then suddenly everything crashes down together, and that's what my teenage youth was made of. Now that was, I now realise, like a lot of studio trickery and a lot of walls of guitars. This pedal lets you do that yourself, do you know what I mean? Provides that disgusting thing. So this is quite an interesting one. We'll get into the intricacies of this one, because the silver knob up here moves between 4 different setups for this pedal, right? So I'll put it off, right? And then I'll put everything else at the middle, right? But what you can do is you can boost, everything in distortion is about the mids and whether they're cut or boosted or whatever, right? You can boost the mids. So the sound's less full. You can flatten the mids. That sounds a bit like you've moved from the neck pickup to the bridge pickup. Or you can cut the mids, which should theoretically be your mentally sounds. So that lets you play around with that sound quite a lot, which is quite useful in the studio. And you get the kind of different applications of muff. Do people often say applications of muff? I usually prefer to have it just off and just get that raw feeling of the Big Muff, right? Now, you have your level, which allows you to, what you should really do with your distortion is you have your clean sound and you want to marry the distortion together with your clean sound so that it's not getting, if you want a boost, create a boost by all means. A lot of the time things get quieter when you turn on the distortion. I used to laugh when you'd be doing like these big metal bands doing sound for these metal bands and everybody steps forward, presses on their pedal and everything is quieter because you've filled the sound up, and because of various sound things sometimes it gets quieter, so you need to top up that level a little bit and marry together what's happening. So that's what the level does. Very, very boring, right? And then you get your tone, which lets you decide how aggressive that cutting through is. So you can do quite a dull tone, or you can have it quite, it's much more muddy. And then the muff decide. The muff is something I've called it muff because it's the best word in the name. It's usually called sustain. So it'll just go on and on forever, or you can really take the edge off it. That's like moving into just kind of overdrive type territory. That's sounding a bit like a tube screamer, but with those really, really pumped lows. Doesn't really sound like a tube screamer, I'm lying. But on the other side. Infinite fun. I have to turn this off every time I want to talk. I've been really lazy, I've not set up a microphone for my voice, so we're just using the audio from the camera. And then obviously you can solo with it. Absolutely beautiful. I bring it out a lot in the studio when people can, because it's my favourite thing ever. And people are like, we probably don't need that on this acoustic folk album. But you may be surprised, especially like crashing chords in the background. This is like it just sounds so much better than a cheap amp. I'm doing this through a valve amp, which just adds even more juice to it. I don't do aesthetics much in the design of the pedals that I build. As you may notice, I tend to spray paint them and then add these wonderful label maker reminders of how everything works. I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time on aesthetics and then it to be chipped and thrown around, because that's kind of what I want to be able to do with the pedals. Now, I'll probably play the Big Muff through most of the modulation pedals as I get through them in the series, but just for a taster, I love mixing distortion with tremolo, and you end up with these beautiful things. If you mix overdrive and valve amp with tremolo, especially that kind of Telecaster sound, you get a kind of lovely country thing going on. But this is just for fun rather than me go through 20 pedals. love is the sound cuts up. It's still decaying through that tremolo. As you can see, I could talk about this stuff all day and just make noises. This is very much for me. After I built quite a few pedals, I decided to film myself building one for some content for the internet. And it's one of my most popular videos. The revenue from YouTube has easily paid for the pedal. It's a fuzz octave, and I did not remember who I built it for. I built it for somebody. So if I gave you a fuzz octave for a birthday or Christmas, please tell me, because it's ripping my knitting. As I say, the revenue comes back. So essentially I get, because I'm lucky enough to have quite a few followers on YouTube, I essentially get new pedals for free, because if I put up a video of me building them, I get the revenue back. Maybe it takes 5 years, but in the long run, free guitar pedals. So, what can I say? Build a Big Muff, buy a Big Muff, beg, borrow, steal. Probably not in reality a hugely useful tool in the more general studio, but a lot of fun. It means that you just need a clean amp and a Big Muff, and then I should turn it on. I could listen to it all day. You almost get these like phasing noises of just everything cutting up and chopping up and all the rest. Absolutely beautiful. The more I speak about this, the more I realise that it is not everybody's passion. I will be showing off some reverbs and some choruses and less aggressive distortions, etc. But there we go, the Big Muff. Don't giggle too much when you say its name.